So welcome everybody, and especially welcome to Jnanavaca. Thank you very much for making the journey from the east.
Pleasure.
Really wonderful to have the sonorous tones of men's voices chanting in the shrine room, so let's have more of that. Yeah, Clive's downstairs, there might be a few more guys joining us, let's see. We'll start off with a short meditation, then I'll say what we're going to do. So just setting yourselves up. Settling into your posture. Arriving. Becoming increasingly rooted. I'm looking for any sense of lightness and uplift. A 10-minute period of meditation. Great. Welcome to Surrey Prabhu. So yeah, in a minute I'll just sort of introduce the morning, just sort of tell you what we'll do first. So yeah, I'll introduce the morning, introduce Jnanavaca, then we'll have the interview, and then yeah, there'll be a chance we'll have a tea break, go into a tea break, and then getting together in groups to think about what Jnanavaca has said and come up with questions, and then there'll be a chance for to put your questions to Jnanavaca, and yeah, for those of you that don't have to rush off afterwards, a chance to stay for shared lunch. We'll record, it's alright to record the interview and the Q&A. Great, great. So, yeah, I just wanted to say a little bit. I'll try not to say too much. I haven't come here to listen to me particularly today, but I just wanted to really celebrate. It's actually the third one of these that we've done. I should mention as well, Arijit sends his apologies. Arijit's been instrumental actually in getting the morning together, and he and I work, getting his mornings up and running. So he's really quite unwell, feeling rough this morning, so he sends his apologies. But yes, the third one of these we've done, and I just wanted to really celebrate that we've got an active and growing men's Sangha here at the NLBC, which is no small thing. When I was thinking about this yesterday, even when one person makes contact with the Dharma and starts practicing the Dharma and making changes in their life, stops doing bad things and starts doing and opening up to that, that's of huge significance. When others come together, like minds come together with a shared vision, I think the significance of that can't be overstated. So really to be celebrated, and there's a comma there, not a full stop. That's not the end. So I think we're in a very fortunate and good position at the moment, and in a way this is just the start. So I'm sure we've got a new chair coming, got Shantikara our new chair, starting next year. In a way he's already started, and he's very sort of Sangha oriented, should we say. And as it happens, we'd already decided to make next year the year of Sangha. Has that been mentioned yet? Anyway, if not, that's a soft launch of what is to come next year. But basically, yes, great that we have this situation as it is now, and yes, so much more is possible. In a way, well, not in a way, there's no limit actually. It's up to the extent that each of us kind of clarify and strengthen that connection with the Dharma, basically, and purifying ourselves. That changes us, and it brings us into closer alignment with each other. And there's no limit to that, right? There's no end point. There's no we've made it. Isn't that great? There's always more to go. There's always further to go. There's always more of the bodhicitta to kind of to step into, to embody. So I'm hugely excited actually about the potential that we have. So yeah, really this is up to us to kind of, to the extent that you want to, there's room here to kind of throw yourself in. I think this might be a hobby horse of mine. I think, well, with any area of practice, with anything to do with the Dharma, there's always a chance that always a risk that it becomes something that is not quite supposed to be. Meditation will become flat. You do well in your practice, you think you're amazing. Whatever it is. And I think with centres, there's always a risk that they become somewhere where you come to get your Buddhism, and that, in a way, in itself, that's no bad thing. People come and they hear about the Dharma, and they maybe go away, and that changes them a bit. It's like, okay, great, fine, but that's not. It could be, the centre can be so much more than that. And I'm not saying that's what the centre is, but I'm saying that there's always a chance with centres that can happen. Actually, the opportunity that we've got is to create Sangha. Actually, is to come together with shared vision, and it's a shared project. So it's rather than being place of consuming, a place of actually creating together. So yeah, if that speaks to you, I mean, I know obviously the fact that you're here, you are engaging, and I know there's lots that many of you are doing. If you want to do more, if you think, gosh, yeah, how can I create Sangha more? You know, come and talk to me, come and talk to Arijit, talk to Shantikara, and yeah, make friends with each other, follow up the connections with order members that you've got, you know, here and elsewhere, and actually significantly, the guys that you meet at the centre here, coming along to classes, take an interest in them. You know, you've got, I sometimes say to people, you know, you've got more to offer than, when I'm talking to myself as well, you know, we've got more to offer than probably we realise. You know, it's quite common to have a bit of a downer on oneself, think, oh, you know, I'm quite new, You've made a connection, it's like there's something really valuable there. So yeah, take an interest in the guys that are coming along, and you know, who knows what we can create here. So yeah, talking about Sangha, we have with us Jnanavaca, who a man who has a deep love for Sangha. He's put much of his life into Sangha, into the order. So just to say a few words. Well, actually, Arijit was going to introduce Jnanavaca. So just personally, I'm delighted that you've come to have spend your Sunday morning with us. When I asked Jnanavaca, I said, got this date, this is what I'm thinking, and just got yes, you know, straight away yes, like, well, great, thank you, so thanks very much. Yeah, and Arijit has actually sent me what he was going to say, so I'm going to channel Arijit now from his sick bed and introduce Jnanavaca. So Arijit says, sorry not to be there today to see all of you and Jnanavaca. I was lucky enough to live with Jnanavaca for 3 years, some time ago in Samagavasa, and I consider him a good friend and inspiring teacher. Jnanavaca is a senior order member on the College of Public Preceptors, president of the Cambridge Buddhist Centre, and long-standing teacher at the London Buddhist Centre, where he's been chair and Mitrakunbuna. Jnanavaca's name means voice of wisdom. His voice says a lot about him. He has quite a deep and sonorous voice, but also has quite an amusing and unexpectedly high-pitched laugh, which you might hear today if you're lucky. And in keeping with this, Jnanavaca has gravitas and authority, whilst also having a great sense of mischievousness and fun. Jnanavaca has an interest in magic. When he was young, to the delight of his classmates, he once made it snow, which grew into an interest in physics, which he studied at Oxford, which grew into an interest in the Dharma, which in the end he decided was both magical and contained the answers to the mysteries of existence. He's a much sought after speaker, so I'm very grateful he's taken the time to come to the NLBC again. He's a man of many qualities, not least his capacity for friendship and his tireless love and enthusiasm for spreading the Dharma. Personally, he gives me a lot of confidence that I'm in the right order. So welcome, Jnanavaca.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Arijit. As soon as you said that Arijit was going to introduce me, I kind of thought, oh my goodness, what does he know? What does he remember from the times that we lived together? That's very kind and generous of him.
Great. So, are the cameras rolling, Marcus? Great, okay, thank you. So, and I must keep an eye on the time, so what time are we going to try and, okay, so we've got about an hour, okay.
Okay, well just interrupt me if I'm going on too long on any one point.
Well, I thought a good place to start would be just hearing a bit about your background, Jnanavaca, and wondered if you could tell us a bit about your family background, and then how you became a Buddhist, and how you ended up getting involved in Triratna.
Well, first of all, it's very nice to be here. North London, I was meditating. I feel very at home in North London. It's where I grew up. So much of my early life was in North London, not exactly in this area. I grew up in East Barnet and then lived in Finchley, which is just down the road really from here. And London's funny, isn't it? North London is very, very different to South London and East London, etc. And there's something about here that I feel at home with. But my family were originally, from India, but my grandparents had moved to Kenya. A lot of Gujarati Indians had moved to Kenya post the Second World War, economic kind of migrants, I guess, to Kenya in East Africa. That's where I was born. And then we moved to England, to London, to Barnet, East Barnet, when I was two and a bit. So I have no real recollection of Mombasa, which was where I was born, Nairobi. So yeah, so I've been in London most of my life. But I can remember feeling like when I was growing up in East Barnet, we were the only Indian family in town. And I didn't speak any English. We spoke Gujarati at home, so I can remember going to school not speaking any English and having to learn how to navigate my way in this weird, slightly alien kind of culture. So why am I saying that? I'm saying that because in a certain sense, from an early age, I was just aware that I didn't quite fit in various ways. And I think that's been a positive thing in my life, having that sort of Indian cultural background, living in sort of leafy Hertfordshire. East Barnet's just sort of north of the boundaries of London. And I have an elder sister who's just joined the order. So she's 8 years older than me. We're very close as kids, and we're close again very much now, but in a different way. She's just joined the order and is called Bodhi Vandana.
Wonderful.
And so I'm very, very pleased and proud of that, of her and the fact that that's happened. Both my parents are dead, but yeah. So she's my closest living relative. Yeah.
And at what point did you decide you were, or discover that you were a Buddhist?
I became interested in Buddhism in my teens. I think from an early age I was sort of existentially challenged. I think I came across some years ago when I was clearing out my mum's house after she died. She kept a school project of mine that I think I might have been 9 or 10, and it was about the meaning of life, or what is the meaning of life. And I was asking all these questions. There was this kind of each page was like a different phase of one's life, from birth to death, and questioning what you were doing, why you were here and why we were here and so forth. And so I think I was always sort of questioning things. And then when I was 11, my dad died. He died quite suddenly with a heart attack one night. And I think that sort of propelled me on a bit of that questioning. I was old enough to start questioning what people were doing with their lives. And it just didn't make sense to me how the adults around me, I had quite a large extended family in London by then, and how after a period of grieving and mourning and so forth, I don't know, people go back to work and things. It just felt really weird. And my dad, he'd worked hard, and we didn't have very much money, and my parents hadn't always got on. There was quite a troubled sort of marriage and tensions in the house. Anyway, all of that, and then you could suddenly drop dead. And he was 45, which when I was 11 seemed really old. And but of course it isn't really old. And I think that sort of got me questioning as to what people were doing. And I kind of thought, I can't just do that sort of normal thing. Why are people not more concerned about life and death and important things? And then, I mean, this sounds rather weird, but I was into magic, as Arijit said, and I tried to communicate with my dad's consciousness after his death through a pack of playing cards. I developed a whole kind of ritual around trying to talk with him. And in a way I was interested in, was there something beyond death? And yeah, well, I would communicate with him. So there was, as far as I was concerned, he was communicating with me through this pack of playing cards. I'd ask questions of the sort of him, and then either cut the deck or more sort of commonly, I'd sort of raise some cards with one finger. One of the cards would come at the top or fall to the ground, and there was always, the questions were always a yes or no kind of question. So there was a card for yes, which was a 5 of hearts, and a card for no, which was an 8 of spades, and a card for I don't know, which was the 3 of diamonds. So the point of that is not that I'm recommending trying to talk to people who've died, but I was then convinced in my own experience that death wasn't the end, which added a sort of urgency and another dimension to then what was life about. If death wasn't the end and this life was part of a bigger, well, journey, to use that rather cliched word, then what were we doing here? And what I knew instinctively was that it couldn't be about, I don't know, buying a house, getting a mortgage, getting a car, getting a good job. Even sort of family wasn't enough, as it were. So I think that was part of my starting to question things and finding Buddhism, and then reading. And my mum became a follower of Osho, and he was a sort of Indian guru who later became very controversial and notorious, but at that stage was more, I don't know, maybe he was always controversial, but she learned to meditate, and so I was sort of aware of meditation. I would read about his teachings, came across some books on Zen Buddhism, didn't understand them, and decided I was a Buddhist. So I was about 14 or so when I was 14, 15. Didn't know the first thing about Buddhism, and but was convinced that there was something more, and probably the fact that I didn't understand what Zen was pointing to gave it an allure and a sort of mystique that was attractive. So I went around in my teens calling myself a Buddhist, mainly trying to impress girls at parties with that, not really knowing what I was doing. Yeah, so it was quite early on. Yeah. It was at university that I started trying to practice Buddhism. I came across a Zen group and tried when I was about 19 to practice with them and failed. If you can fail, well, you can actually, can't you? Well, in my eyes at that time, I couldn't do it. Sort of gave up.
Yeah. Just while you're talking, I remember something that I've heard you say previously about, I think, standing in a pub talking about Buddhism and then realising that actually, no, that's not enough. And was that any part of
it was
you getting true right now?
A bit more silly than that. I was in this Zen group that I was practicing in. It was an offshoot of the Buddhist Society in London. Their main practice to start off with, and I never got beyond the starting blocks, was mindfulness in daily life. And one of those, it was daily life practice, and one of the main sort of instructions was to choose a time when you went to bed at night and choose a time when you got up in the morning, and don't waver from it for even a minute or a second or something. So you had to get to bed. So I don't know, I had to be in bed at 11 or something, and I was hopeless. I can't do it now. I mean, I can't get up at regular. I have no real capacity, it seems, for routine. Certainly no love for routine. I couldn't do it then as a 19-year-old student, and I can remember being down the pub with a pint, almost full pint, and my housemate saying to me, "Shouldn't you be in bed?" like in 10 minutes or something, and thinking yes, but the pint was too expensive and precious to waste. So downing the pint as quickly as I could, leaping on my bike, rushing home, and leaping into bed, and feeling quite pleased with myself for being a good Buddhist. But eventually it dawned on me that it wasn't working. Well, A, I wasn't able to keep to a routine, and B, I didn't really know why I was doing it. Yeah. Now I can sort of see that it was part of what the idea was, that you deliberately set yourself sort of boundaries and constraints within which you would experience resistance. Resistance was a sign of egotism, rebelling against the constraints you'd created. And then when you felt that resistance, you had to surrender to it, bow. Not surrender in the sense of give up to the resistance, give in to the resistance, I don't mean that, but you had to bow to the resistance, to let it burn away egotism. It's part of the Oxfording kind of pictures. And so there was a lot of bowing, and certainly there was a lot of resistance. And nowadays I kind of think, look, yes, that's important to have constraints or challenges in your life that you have to work within, but you can find them in different ways. You know, like you've just had, I don't know, you've got 2 young children. That's going to provide a lot of constraint in your life, and resistance will arise. Presumably, you do have to
already, but yes.
And then that can be part of your practice. Or in my case, I don't know, I've taken responsibility in our order of movement in various forms, and goodness, resistance has arisen and still does. And you know, so there can be other ways of doing that rather than just a rather artificial constraint. Although there's nothing wrong with that sort of discipline, it's just that I couldn't do it.
Okay, so moving on to when you're a little bit older, I know you studied quantum physics.
Just physics. I mean, quantum physics was part of that.
Yeah.
I studied physics.
With a keen interest in science, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask you how your interest in like the further reaches of science, how that sort of informs your view on consciousness and on Dharma practice.
Yeah, I mean, I think studying physics in some ways was a mistake. I didn't really have I wasn't very good at it. And I realised quite quickly that I wasn't that interested in it either. What I was interested in was the ideas about what is the nature of reality, what's the nature of truth, what's going on. And I sort of rather naively thought that physics would give me some clues, if not answers, as to what's going on. What it did do, and so I sort of endured the physics course, I survived it, rather than, I don't know, in some ways I don't have a very scientific mind. But what it did do, looking back, what it did do was give me even further evidence, if I needed it, that reality is not what it appears to be, that this common sense assumptions about what's going on, just things like tables and chairs and us being beings and entities and, I don't know, just ordinary common sense perceptions about matter, about space, about time, none of that revealed the truth. But our senses, our ordinary senses, do not reveal the truth. And that reality is far more unimaginably mysterious than we ordinarily comprehend. And it seems to be, certainly when you get into quantum physics and relativity and I don't know, modern physics generally, it seems to be not just different to how we perceive the world, it's really counterintuitive. It turns all our notions upside down, including, at least, it questions at least whether there's an objective world out there at all, independently of our perceiving. So all of that has helped me, I think, undermined, in a positive way, undermined any kind of traces of scientific materialism, that matter is all there is. I don't think I have that very deeply in me anyway, but studying physics has given me a bit more evidence or ammunition that things are not what they seem. I sometimes have said to people who do think that matter is all there is, you know, that we're biological machines and consciousness is just a product of the brain, or I say just, but anyway, consciousness is a product. I sometimes say to them, look, if you're going to be a scientific materialist, at least try and understand what physics has to say about what matter is, because it's so not what you think. That would at least open you up to other sort of ideas and possibilities that there's more to the world than we think. Yeah.
You touched, I mean, in a way you've hinted at the answer to this already, but I know you conducted some interviews with the neuroscientist Ian McGilchrist.
Yes,
talked quite a bit about this area. Do you think that consciousness is primary or matter is primary, and is there anything that you can share, like from your experience, that sort of gives an inkling as to why that might be the case?
Of course, I don't know, and it's kind of impossible to know. And in some ways, maybe matter and consciousness are two sides of the same phenomena. Maybe they're not sort of one before the other or something. But if you had to sort of say, well, Buddhism would say, at least there's a school of Buddhism, the Yogacara school, which is a later school of Buddhism. The Buddha didn't, for example, speculate about such things. The Buddha sort of just said, look, get on with it. You're suffering, and you're suffering because you're deluded, and this is the way out of suffering, and never mind what the nature of reality is. Can you just get on with it? And that pragmatism and sort of reticence is probably, there's a wisdom to that, isn't there? There's a wisdom to that. Nevertheless, I think we live in a world where there are lots of ideas about what's going on, and one of the prevalent ideas is that matter is primary, and that matter is the essence of stuff is, I don't know, atoms and whatever the atoms are made of and whatever those little subatomic particles are made of, but ultimately there's just material stuff and everything is made of that. And that is a very prevalent idea in the modern world, and it's not in keeping with Buddhism. Buddhism, if anything, would say it's the other way around, that consciousness precedes matter. So for example, on the Wheel of Life, on the outer rim of the Wheel of Life, you've got some pictures depicting how birth and death and rebirth arise, and it's said that, you know, after the death of the body, there's this continuation of some sort of, let's call it a stream of consciousness that then eventually finds another form. So in that sense, consciousness and matter are sort of in a sort of play, in a dance of consciousness finding form, sort of manifesting in form. I've just been listening to Bernardo Kastrup. I'll come on to Ian McGilchrist, but Bernardo Kastrup is an idealist philosopher, idealist in the sense that he believes that consciousness is the primary reality. And you know, he's a very intelligent man, and I think his experiences are coloured by psychedelics. And then he's sort of read a lot of philosophy, and he's very erudite, but he's also a scientist. Yeah, he's sort of saying everything is of the stuff of consciousness, and this material stuff is the outer manifestation of consciousness. Just as you could say that, look, we're these physical beings or biological beings, we've got these physical material bodies, but inside it doesn't feel like that. It feels like we're conscious, alive beings perceiving and experiencing the world. And maybe, certainly according to Castro, everything internally is alive. There's the outer dimension of things, which is what we think of as matter, and the inner dimension of things, the subjective dimension of things, which is what we think of as consciousness, and maybe they're two sides of the same thing. But he's certainly an idealist in that sense, and he was, this morning I was listening to a little YouTube thing of him, and he was talking about Schopenhauer, and Schopenhauer was an idealist, and there's this Western kind of tradition of idealism going back to Kant and probably early, into Plato and so forth. What's interesting is that there are scientists now, like Bernardo Castro and like Ian McGilchrist, Dr. Ian McGilchrist, who's a neuroscientist and a psychiatrist, and he's a polymath actually. He taught English at Oxford. He's a professor of literature as well. Anyway, he's saying from his sort of neuroscience background that he thinks consciousness is primary, not reducible to matter. Of course, he was saying he doesn't know, he can't prove this, but he is saying that everything that we know about matter comes from our mind. I mean, it comes from consciousness, doesn't it? It's that way round, isn't it? Everything that we know about the material world is, in a way, everything that we know about anything is coming from the mind. It's that way round. So I find that really interesting that you've got scientists now saying that. And physicists actually have been saying that. Some physicists have been saying not all physicists, of course, would believe that, but since the 20th century, start of the 20th century.
Makes me think that so-called primitive people who maybe thought animism, that they're onto something. Us in our modern clever world aren't quite as clever as
well, Bhante's talked about paganism, hasn't he? He thinks that for Buddhism to really take root, you've got to, in a way, see the world as animate, as alive. I think he talks about how if you don't see the universe as alive, your enlightenment isn't possible.
That's a nice segue onto my next question, actually. So Bhante, he said a lot in his life, and one of the things he said was, guard your sources of inspiration. I wondered if you wouldn't mind sharing some of your sources of inspiration. And well, also some of the things that, we all struggle with different things, like some of the things that you struggle with and how you work with them.
I think I've been very fortunate in terms of friendship, and I've found I've had a lot of friendship in my life, in my Dharma life, and a lot of Kalyana Mitrata, and I've put myself in conditions. I say I put myself, in a way it feels like I've just found myself into conditions where there's a lot of friendship, a lot of Kalyana Mitrata, and I think that is a source of inspiration. I've lived in the community, one of the men's communities above the LBC for 28 years now. And that's been a source of huge amount of friendship.
And there's a few of you who've been in there for
that long. Maitri Bandhu and Param Bandhu and myself have been there. They've been there even longer than that. And they're, two of my closest kind of friends. So I think that I'm one of these people that's not very, I was saying I'm not very disciplined. I have not much sort of self-discipline. I don't have that much sort of self-motivation. I've really relied on external conditions and then people around me to draw me out and in a way keep me on the path, if that makes sense. So good conditions. I mean, in a way, this is basic Buddhism, that you put yourself in conditions that are going to help you grow. And I've found myself in those conditions, slightly accidentally it feels, or at least fortuitously. I found myself in very, very, very good conditions. Having said that, I am inspired by the Dharma internally as well, and meditation's an important source of that inspiration. Retreats, solitary retreats particularly, have been, I've sort of done an annual solitary retreat probably every year since I was ordained. That was, I was ordained in 1999, and those retreats have been like gold. They're very, very precious to me. So retreats and meditation. Teaching, Dharma teaching is a sort of practice that inspires me. Like coming here this morning, had you not invited me, had I not, as it were, had to get out of bed to come here, I might not have got out of bed. Not the time I did, if you see what I mean. And so there's resistance still to, I don't know, doing something that is going to demand a little bit more from me. But when I do try and communicate the Dharma or share the Dharma with friends, or I feel really inspired and alive, and particularly seeing people come to the centre and discovering the Dharma for themselves is such a source of inspiration. I think when you've been practicing for a number of years, I don't know about you, but it's easy to become slightly complacent and take for granted what we've been given. So seeing new people discover the Dharma is, it reminds me of how rare and precious all this is, our Sangha is, and Bante's teaching, how rare and precious it is. So I think there are I find I need to be reminded, and fortunately I've still got those good conditions.
Great. When you talk about good conditions, I think part of that is, a big part of that is the order. Right? So I just wanted to ask you a bit about the order. I mean, you've given yourself very fully to the order, and part of responsibility within that. Just wanted to ask you a bit more about that, and if you could say, if you can say, what difference it's made to your life to join the order, and not just to join, but to take an active role, and as I say, take significant responsibility within it.
Joining the order, I mean, getting to the point where joining the order, being part of this community is, I don't know, it's so sort of central to my life that I can't always see how it's changed me. I can't now imagine my life without the Sangha, without the order. I still sometimes, when I remember my ordination, I was ordained in India by Subhuti, and it's the sort of turning point in my life. Joining the order, in a certain sense, you're joining, a community of practitioners who have committed their life to the three jewels in this particular tradition and context. But in another sense, I think there's something more magical that happens that I don't really know. Something happened, and it's not just a sort of private, individual affair. Something changes in, something. It's like the universe responds to you. You make a commitment, and there's an objective kind of response, and that still feels like what I'm trying to work out in my life. So taking responsibility in our order and movement has been, what has it been? I've disliked it really, on the whole. I wouldn't have done it I wouldn't have done it had I not found myself being asked to take on those responsibilities and being in a position where I could. Like I was Mitra Convener and then chair at the LBC. I can remember Ananda was, you were helping with Mitra Convening when I first came along, and I was fundraiser first, and I was rubbish at fundraising at the LBC, and you were so kind and helpful to me. You once said to me that you might fail at fundraising and that doesn't matter. What's important is that you go for refuge to the three jewels. And so in a certain sense the response, and that stayed with me because I didn't exactly fail, but I didn't shine. And then I was treasurer at the LBC for 4 years, and I hated that. Then I was Mitra Convening.
Oh, so moving on, actually, forget this question. Tell us about some nice things.
And what was important to me was serving the Dharma, rather than taking responsibility. like when I became chair at the LBC, I really didn't want to do it.
I remember you saying that, yeah.
But what was important was that I want to help spread the Dharma in the world. And I want to serve Bante's vision of the Dharma. I feel myself to be a disciple of Bante, want to do my best by him and his vision. Serving the Dharma, helping to communicate the Dharma and help spread the Dharma in the world seems to be the most important thing I can do in my life. If that means taking up particular responsibilities, then I'll do that.
Yeah.
I'm not, for example, I'm not an artist. That might be another way that people serve the Dharma.
Yeah.
I'm not, but I can sort of do various other things. You know, so that's been how I've sort of worked.
Yeah.
What it's done for me, it goes back to that sort of thing about resistance.
Mm-hmm.
I've had to go against the grain and do things, and then that helps you grow, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a teaching in there, isn't there? It's like,
Yeah.
you know, there's oneself and
Yeah.
you know, one's wishes and preferences and all of
Yeah.
that, and then there's you know, our potential, and
Yeah.
in a way what you've said sort of highlights where Sangha comes into that.
Yeah.
You wish to serve, so you give yourself over to something which your preferences actually, you know, hasn't been your preference.
Yeah.
And in that,
You grow.
You grow, yeah.
You grow, and it's really fulfilling.
Yeah.
It's like some. It's just been so fulfilling. Like, I don't know, I was involved in the development of the new Vajrasana, and I was chair at the time. I wasn't the only person involved in the centre. There were a group of us working closely with architects, professional architects and so forth. And, you know, but it took a number of years, that building, and I lost a lot of sleep and hair and at times I can remember we demolished the old Vajrasana, like there were outbuildings and so forth. We demolished them, and then, you know, costs were just going up and up and up and up, and we didn't have the money, and there were so many things that went wrong along the way. I did kind of think I'm going to be known as the man who demolished the retreat centre and then ran out of money to build a new one. But when it did open, and we did build the new Vajrasana, I say we built it, I mean, in a way, lots and lots of people, the professionals built it, but I was involved in it and sort of responsible for holding the project from the LBC's side. And I felt I literally felt I could die now and be completely happy that I had contributed to something that is worthwhile, more worthwhile than I could have ever imagined being involved in, and yeah, I'm happy to die now. And in a way, there's something still of that. So I think being involved in the Sangha, throwing yourself into projects where you can contribute, where we can contribute to helping other people discover the Dharma, is something that is the most fulfilling thing that I can think of doing. The most valuable thing. And so I've gained immensely from that. I feel very grateful.
I think maybe you've answered this question, but maybe there's a bit more to say. How important do you think the path of responsibility is for Anandavajra practice? Yeah. And particularly, like, how do we go about taking it, or how does one go about taking it if one's not ordained? It might be easy to think, oh yes, well, order members are ordained, you know, you take responsibility,
I think it's kind of essential. But what do I mean? I think not taking, well, if we're not taking responsibility, then then we're not taking responsibility for our lives. And what does that mean? That we live a life that's somehow not living up to our potential and probably not contributing to the well-being of others in the world. So that feels, I don't know, tricky and so limited. So why am I saying this? I think one of the things I see that's a bit different now to when I was younger is that there's a lot more, for young people, there's a lot more choice in the world. and there's so many things that you can do or not do with your life. I think that it can be paralysing as to what am I going to do with my life. For example, even choice in terms of relationships, sexual relationships, romantic relationships, you can now sort of choose to commit to one person, or you can not. You could be polyamorous or so forth. You can, I don't know, there's so much choice on offer, particularly in the Western world, particularly in maybe in London. The danger is that we don't do anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think commitment and responsibility, which are sort of unfashionable words, are so key to making sure that you do something with your life, that we do something. And so I don't just mean responsibility within the structures of Triratna, I mean responsibility in some aspect of your life, and preferably in a way that is helping other people. Taking responsibility in a way that we're living in a world where we're improving the world. The world needs people to do that. Now, if you can do it in the context of Sangha, I think that's even more fantastic, because the world needs spiritual communities, and Triratna's Sangha is an example of a group of people who, at their best anyway, the Sangha at its best, is a real force for good in the world. It's tiny, and you know, we're all aware of the horrors that are going on in the world. And sometimes it feels like what we're doing is tiny, and it sort of is. And I really believe that what Bante's vision was can we collectively as a Sangha help to elevate the consciousness of human beings? Can we raise the level of consciousness of humanity to a higher level? He talked about it in terms of evolution, higher evolution. He talked about it in so many ways. I feel that Bante was here to help human beings raise their level of consciousness, and he used Buddhism, he used Western culture, he used whatever was at his disposal, and because he was so erudite and so well read and such a master of so many disciplines in a way, that he had a lot of tools at his disposal. But I think that was his mission. In a way, Buddhism was part of a bigger mission, if you see what I mean. It wasn't, he was using Buddhism as a way of saying that human beings can raise their level of consciousness. Now, and you look at some of the horrors that are happening in the Middle East or in Ukraine or whatever, and of course there are horrible things that have happened throughout human history. So I don't know whether it's worse now than it ever has been or not. It just feels horrible. And of course there are socio-political kind of economic reasons and all of that. But at its heart, at the most fundamental level, it's like human beings have to raise their level of consciousness, because their unenlightened humanity is still full of self-centeredness and greed and hatred. And if you raise your level of consciousness, you would find yourself, I hope, not being able to hurt people, kill people. You'd find yourself not being able to do that. So I think that Sangha, helping, in a way, continue Bante's vision of helping human beings raise their level of consciousness, and Sangha is the way that we can do it, is a really important contribution to the world. It's not the only contribution, of course, but it is a really important contribution to the world. And if consciousness, to go back to Ian McGilchrist and all of that, if consciousness is the primary thing, if that is what this manifest world is manifestations of consciousness, then raising the level of consciousness is somehow of existential significance. It's the main thing. Yeah, it's the main thing. Yeah. So taking responsibility to go back, if we can do it in terms of helping in in this Sangha, or in maybe in, if this Sangha doesn't work for you, in any other context, helping people raise a level of consciousness, which implies that you have to do it for yourself. You can't help other people if you're not also working on your own mind. If we can contribute to that, and this centre's doing that, and all the centres in Triratna are doing that, the order is trying to do that. And we, the order is imperfect, and we squabble sometimes, and we fall out with each other, and there are conflicts and issues and problems, and we're working in the world, imperfect beings working in an imperfect world. But at least that's the vision that we're all sort of signed up for, is that we want to raise our own level of consciousness and help others do the same. And that's, I think, the vision for human beings. Sorry to go on. I've been watching and reading about people who have had near-death experiences. So this goes back to, in a way, consciousness being primary. And there does seem to be some commonalities between, that people say common things. And I don't just mean about a tunnel of light and things. I mean that they come back, these people, and they change their lives. They lose interest, they say, in acquisition and materialism and so forth. They become people who are trying to be less selfish in the world, and I don't know, aligned to something, to higher values. And a lot of them come back and they say that this incarnation as human beings on earth, this embodied incarnation, is it's very precious, a lot of them say, and it's precious because we're here to learn, we're here to grow, and the growth and learning is in the direction of love, of unconditional love. So when we do the metta bhavana, in fact when we do any kind of Buddhist practice, it's in that direction. I'd say that you could add in awareness and love, so you sort of end up with wisdom and compassion. So it's interesting that these people, often coming from all sorts of walks of life, come back with some common messages, as it were, and it's that we're here to grow. Yeah. And then that goes back all the way to my childhood intuition that there had to be more. So I think there's a strand there, and responsibility is part of that. If we don't take responsibility, what are we doing in our lives? We're not going to grow.
So easy, isn't it, for that there must be something more for it just to remain as like a faint wandering, and
yeah.
Or maybe there is a connection, and then it just like, I don't know, I'm thinking of like the hippies of the 60s. Some connection, but then it's just sort of gets lost in the world, basically, in the mind.
And unfortunately, Buddhism can go that way, can't it? It can become more and more just about me and my growth. And if the direction of growth is to do with metta, unconditional love, if wisdom is about realizing that we're not really separate, that there's something beyond this sense of separate me and world, me and you, then taking responsibility, contributing to the well-being of others, developing more capacity for empathy, not being so absorbed in what I want to do, me and my world, even me and my Buddhist life, is essential. So the trap is that we get trapped in a sort of refined selfishness of Buddhism, or a slightly narcissistic life that involves a bit of spirituality provided by Buddhism. So I think responsibility is a way out of that trap. And it starts, doesn't it, with just, helping with a class at the centre. It doesn't have to be becoming some chair of some big thing. It's like, can I help out? Can I befriend? You were talking about, however new you might think you are to the Dharma, there'll be somebody who is newer. And if you can be friendly towards somebody when you meet them that's newer, then that's responsibility.
Gosh,
Yeah.
lots in there.
Yeah.
When you've mentioned Bante several times, as is fitting. I wondered if you could tell us just a bit about, well, your relationship. He's obviously no longer with us. What your relationship was like, or it might be more true to ask what your relationship with him is like.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether you've got any anecdotes or experience of him that sort of give some flavour of the man that he was.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know him as a friend. Like, I wasn't close to him in that personal way. He was always a teacher, and I was always a bit in awe of him when I met with him. But I did have the good fortune of meeting him quite a number of times, both in groups and collective situations. You know, he'd come to dinner in our community in those early days when I moved in. I've studied with him, and I've had quite a number of one-to-one meetings with him, and of course then, you know, I've studied his writings and teachings, and in a way I've got to know him more through his writings and teachings, and fortunately we can still do that. His memoirs, sometimes neglected, but I think they're really they're gold. They're wonderful to get to know him. What was he like? I don't know. I mean, my experience of him was as an elderly kind of gentleman. So by the time I got to know him, the sort of persona that he had adopted, he was no longer in that hippie kind of long-haired, rings on fingers, shamanic kind of figure. He was more like tweed jacket and grey cardigan and slippers, elderly gentleman figure. And he was, somebody has called him studiedly uncharismatic. He was very ordinary when you encountered him, at least that was my impression in that way. So I'd go and see him, and he'd be very mindful, very deliberate, very measured, and very ordinary. And we'd talk often about very ordinary things. And every time you just have this sense that behind that ordinariness there's a sort of vastness that I can't fathom. There were times when I had meetings with him where the conversation was quite sort of unmemorable, and then I'd come away and my mind had felt like I'd just been just been meditating and had just been elevated in a way that didn't feel like I'd done anything. It was being in his presence that had done that.
And unrelated to the conversation, it
and
sounds
unrelated to the conversation.
Yeah,
he also had this ability, though, to move from that relatively mundane, kind of ordinary, friendly communication of what you're reading, you've been reading that. And he always had a take on anything that you... So you know, I can remember talking to him about, I'd just been to see a play about Mary Queen of Scots, and suddenly we were into the Tudors and Mary Queen of Scots, her relationship with Elizabeth I, where this play came from, what did I think about Mary and her life and her husband's, and of course I knew nothing about, you know, suddenly there was this whole world that he could talk about, but he also then had the ability, uncanny ability, to just suddenly drop into depth. And Maitreya Bandhu was putting it the other day, and he was saying it was like the room would sort of darken, the lights would dim, and suddenly you'd be in an intense, deeper communication. Certainly that was my experience of it. Sometimes I can remember, for example, studying with him, and we were sitting in a circle. He had sort of, this was at Padmaloka, he'd lost his sight not long before that. So he could make out shapes, but not much more. We'd be sitting in a circle studying one of his talks, and I had the distinct sense that he could he would look at me and answer questions that were in my mind. And they weren't, I don't think, always obvious questions. There was a distinct sense that he knew what I was thinking. I'm not saying he was always able to do that, and I can't prove it, and etc. But there was just this slightly uncanny thing about Bhante. Very, very sort of friendly and concerned and kind. He's always been very kind in my interactions. For me, though, he exists now on more of an archetypal level, and I think he always sort of did. So there was this human being with a rather particular personality that, I don't know, wasn't always easy. I didn't find him always sort of easy to chat to, and sometimes a bit sort of even difficult to talk to. There was that sort of, and he was a genius, and geniuses are often, they don't fit into our sort of boxes. I just went to see last night Maestro, the film about Leonard Bernstein, and he was a genius, and he didn't fit into any kind of box, and Bhante certainly didn't. But for me, he also seemed to exist on this other level, on this other dimension, that he was a being who I couldn't fathom.
Yeah.
You know, and there was one time when I talked to him about some deeper meditative experiences. I'd had some significant sort of mystical experiences, and I felt very grateful actually, and I wanted to just say thank you to him. And we didn't sort of dwell on them very much, but I knew that he knew what I was talking about, and he knew the terrain much, much more. He was in touch with a much more vastness, and I glimpsed something, and he was saying yes, and yes, and there's this. There was just that sort of sense, you know that somebody is in touch with something. One of my experiences was, well, now that he is no longer physically present, I feel free to just imagine him like I used to do with my father, imagine him being there and talking to him, and when I meditate I bring him to mind and pray to him and ask for his blessings, and I experience something. I experience my mind being lifted up. So he's still present for me. But last year I was at Jnanavaca, I was co-leading with Paramabandhu the ordination course, 3-month ordination course at Jnanavaca. And during that I had a visionary kind of experience, which I'll share with you, because I think it, for me, illustrates how I think of Bhante now. And so I was meditating and it was just sitting really, so I wasn't trying, but I was quite absorbed. And Padmasambhava appeared, and Padmasambhava, this semi-historical, semi-mythical figure, is Bhante had a very particular close connection with this figure, Padmasambhava, and of course he represents the archetypal guru. The guru principle, you could say, the principle of a teacher, is embodied in Padmasambhava, as well as lots of other symbolic representations. Now, I don't meditate on Padmasambhava. I've never really taken up his visualization practice, and so I'm not a visionary meditator in that I don't have visual, very visual kind of imagery turning up, etc. It's not common for me to have visions, that's what I'm trying to say. Anyway, so I'm meditating, and suddenly, I wasn't thinking about Padmasambhava, but he's there. It's definitely him. I can sort of see that it's definitely him. But it wasn't so much the visual, it was a sense that of presence, and what was slightly unnerving was this sense that he was looking at me and aware of me. He was seeing me. And you know the image of Padmasambhava, he's quite stern. He has a sort of smile, but it's called a semi-wrathful smile, so he's definitely sort of slightly, you know, sort of, there's a certain sort of challenge to the gaze. And he's aware of me, and that felt very different to me trying to imagine him. It was there. And I was slightly taken aback because it was unexpected, but I said in my mind, in my heart, what I assumed was a good thing to say, to ask. I said, "Great Guru, please give me a teaching." I probably had Queen Yang Chung, and there's a sort of, in the life and liberation of Padmasambhava, there's an encounter with a queen who asks for a teaching. Queen Yang Chung. Anyway, I said, "Great Guru, please give me a teaching." I said it in my mind silently, and waited, and he didn't. And there was silence, and he didn't give me a teaching, but nor did he stop looking at me and being aware of me. As it were, he didn't disappear, but there was nothing. And the sort of gaze was a bit more penetrating, it felt unnerving. And I sort of plucked up the courage and said, "Great Guru, please give me a teaching again." And by now I didn't know whether I really wanted a teaching. And particularly, you know, you ask Padmasambhava for a teaching, you're going to get something that is direct and challenging, and maybe I don't want to hear it. And if it's like, you know, what do you think you're doing? Get off your backside and practice a bit more harder, or get up in the morning, or what about those Netflix box set series that you get hooked on? You know, there were all sorts of teachings that he could have sort of, you know, that I didn't want. And but second time there was nothing. There was still nothing. And so I repeated it again. I said, "Great Guru, please give me a teaching," with my heart slightly in my mouth. And this time there was a direct, immediate response. It was just 4 words, and they were like, it wasn't like I could hear them so much as they were implanted in my mind, and they weren't from me. They were in another sort of voice, you could say, I guess. And the words were, "I gave you Bhante. I gave you Bhante." And the tone, the feeling sense, the tone was, "What more do you want?" What more do you want? And you could have added, "You silly, silly boy." It was that sort of tone. I gave you Bhante, and you still want a teaching. And for me, Bhante occupies that. I was so stunned, I just came out of the meditation. But for me, Bhante exists on another level. It's like he comes from that dimension of Padmasambhava, of Amitabha. He exists, and I think he came here in this embodied form that we know of as Bhante Sangharachita, with all the personality, quirks and eccentricities and genius and so forth. I think he was here to help elevate human beings and their consciousness from another dimension. That's how I see it. And I think that force, power, consciousness that he is still around and can help you.
Gosh, I was going to ask you, what would you say to someone who comes along and says, what's all this stuff about Bhante?
Yeah.
You know, he's not here. We've got all the all the books downstairs on the shelf. Lots of good order members giving talks. Yeah. It's like, why? Who needs Bhante anymore?
Yeah. In a way, you don't. In a way, like if you've never met the man and I don't know, don't particularly relate. Sometimes people don't relate to his writings even. and you are still getting inspiration from people in the Sangha that you are meeting, in a way that's fine. You don't need to have that personal connection. It's not possible to have a particularly personal connection. Well, I say it's not possible. Actually, I've met people who have never met Bhante, who do have that personal connection, and he has appeared to them in dreams and visions and so forth. So you don't have to. The main thing is you get on with your practice, and if Triratna and the way that we practice here works for you, and that's all you need. We're not a sort of movement which has a sort of guru. He didn't act as a guru, did he? He acted as a practitioner who was sharing the Dharma with us, and wasn't expecting us to then worship him at all, and wasn't expecting us even to always agree with him. He was expecting us to practice. That was what his relationship to us kind of was. Nevertheless, for me, as I say, he partly appears in this archetypal space in my consciousness as a guru, as a teacher, who I want to bow down to and worship. But that's me. You don't have to do that. I also know that he wasn't fully enlightened and wasn't perfect. And as a human being, there were probably things that I wouldn't agree with. And sometimes I've had this odd experience of reading his memoirs again. I've read them 3 or 4 times. And the last time I read them, and there was a time, and I thought, I don't like you. I don't really like you, Bhante. And at the same time, there's just this devotion and love and gratitude, and I feel that I owe you my life, and I will do whatever I can to serve you. So it's a bit like, you don't have to like. I don't know. The Sangha's mysterious, isn't it? You don't have to get on with everybody to feel very, very deeply connected with them.
I think that's quite impactful. That those two responses can, I mean, in a way, to use the same word to describe both things is not right. They're such different kind of responses, but that you can have those two kind of responses together, and it just makes me think, like, don't take any initial response Bhante as a full stop. There's always more, isn't there?
There's always more. It's interesting. I mean, just on this other level, seeing film about Leonard Bernstein last night, I didn't like him as he was portrayed, at least in the film. I've never met him and I don't know anything about him. So, and goodness, he was a genius, and I'm really grateful to have people of his caliber, artistic geniuses, that have added to the wealth of human existence in some way. And from my perspective, Bhante exists on a much even higher plane than that. So I think we get quite sentimental in our culture about we've got to sort of like everybody and get on with them. And if you live in a community, as I've done for a number of years, you will live with people that you don't immediately warm to. In terms of your personality, you might not like them. And yet, I've found over the years, they've become some of my deepest friends. So I think we tend to sometimes just judge people on a very superficial level.
And that's gone to quite an extreme, hasn't it, in our culture and social media.
Social media. And do I like their tweet or not? And if they say the wrong thing in their tweet, then they're out of my life, kind of thing. But human beings are like that. Do I like the look of this person, the colour of their hair, the manner of their speaking, the way, and it's a very, very superficial kind of way of relating. And if we want to actually grow, we've got to be open to deeper levels of relating. And with Bhante, it just felt there was no limit to how deep you could go in your relating, and I still feel that that's true.
Coming towards the end, but there's a couple more things I wanted to ask you about. You mentioned this film that you saw last night. I gather that the arts and culture is important to you.
Yeah.
Could you say a bit about, how important to you and in your life, and particularly your Dharma life?
Goodness.
Whether you've got any recommendations?
Yeah. In some ways, it isn't. I think I was at a college meeting just a couple of weeks ago, and some college members. The college is a college of. It's a group of people who are responsible for the ordinations in Jnanavaca and the ordination training in Jnanavaca. Anyway, so there's a meeting. There's about 15 men and women all over the world who are part of that group. So I was at a meeting a couple of weeks ago in Adishtana, and a dozen or so college members presented some of their artistic and creative loves in some ways. And I kind of thought, goodness, I'm not an artist. I'm really not an artist. I don't have this sort of zeal, and part of me is even a bit wary of it, in case at its best it can, I think, be a means to elevate human consciousness. At its worst, I think it can become a sort of indulgence, you know. But yes, nevertheless, I think films, reading, music have been important, and I think I love living in London in that I can, all those things are available, paintings, there's so much cultural stuff available. Actually, I don't make enough use of it, you know, but I was at a concert last week, a quartet there's a sort of violinist, a cellist, a piano, and a viola player, and they were all young. They were the oldest was 31, and it was at Wigmore Hall, playing some music, Brahms and other things that I hadn't heard before, and it was electric. I mean, it was absolutely wonderful, and I kind of just found myself so uplifted. And actually, hadn't it not been for a friend, I might not have bothered going to that concert because I didn't know the music, I didn't know the musicians. I think that what Bhante has given us is lots of different paths to raise consciousness, and art and culture is one of them. Beauty is very, very important in Bhante's presentation of the Dharma. It's like if we raise our consciousness, if we are seeing with the eyes of love and awareness, and if we start to glimpse this kind of non-dual awareness where we no longer feel separate from the world, one of the experiences is said to be beauty, that we see beauty. We see everything as beautiful. We see perhaps beauty beyond form. So I think arts and culture can raise that level. So I don't know if I have got. I mean, one film that I've particularly appreciated this year is Oppenheimer, partly because it speaks to my interest in physics. And who's seen Oppenheimer? Yeah. Did you like it? Did you? Yeah. I mean, I saw it 3 times, and I think I'd still see it again. Partly, I think it's a mythic kind of film, isn't it? And it speaks about this quest for truth and all the mess that can happen, and imperfect human beings trying to work out their lives, and the moral dilemmas that can involve, etc. So yes, films, music, reading. I'm currently reading a book by a guy called Vasily Grossman, who is he's no longer alive. He was a 20th century Russian writer. The book is called Stalingrad, and it's about the siege of Stalingrad, the Battle of Stalingrad in the Second World War. But he it's part of a duology. The second part is called Life and Fate, which was translated into English earlier than Stalingrad, and I read Life and Fate a number of years ago. So it's the second part. I've read it the wrong way round, which a lot of people have done because of the way that things were published in English. But he's been compared to Tolstoy, and Stalingrad and Life and Fate are his sort of war and peace. It's an extraordinary, particularly at the moment when there is so much war going on and Russia's at war and so forth, I wanted to read something from the Russian perspective. Yes.
Talking of books, this will be our last question. You're writing a book yourself with Maitri Bandhu, I believe,
Yes.
on meditation.
Yeah.
It's a very different kind of book to the one
Yeah.
you're reading. I wondered if you could say just a bit about why you're writing the book and what you're hoping to communicate.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I have to come clean. Maitri Bandhu is doing all the work. He's doing the writing. I'm going to have my name on the cover, I think, unless he completely loses patience with me. I'm helping him write it. He's doing the writing. I'm sort of doing quite a bit. I guess I am contributing in terms of content. The book is, it's about meditation, but it's more than meditation. It's about approaches to the spiritual life, approaches to the Dharma life, based on a model that Subhuti conceived of in 2003. 20 years ago. And very briefly, he talked about 4 myths of the spiritual life, and it's about that. And the myths are that you can either think of yourself, the spiritual life, if we're moving towards enlightenment, you can either think of enlightenment as outside of you, or you can think of it as inside of you. Like, outside of you, the Buddha is outside of you, and you're moving towards the Buddha, or inside of you, you're discovering the Buddha within. Does that make sense? Yeah. But there are 2 other variations on that. There's a sort of active approach and a receptive approach. So if the Buddha is if enlightenment's outside of you, you can either grow towards the Buddha and talk in terms of development, or you can receptively open up to the influence of the Buddha and surrender to that influence. Similarly, if the Buddha is within you, if enlightenment is within you, you can work to uncover it, or you can let go into it and allow it to emerge. And all of those approaches are, they're there in the Buddhist tradition. All of them are models, metaphors. They're not absolute reality. They're not, because inside and outside belong in the dualistic framework. And they're not absolute. But we're not always in that non-dual framework, so we need some models. They're models. They're all there in the Buddhist tradition. They're all there probably in different spiritual traditions. I guess in the theistic traditions, you particularly emphasize surrender and opening up to. But in Buddhism, you can look at it in all those ways. And each of them has their advantages and disadvantages, their pitfalls and their sort of pros. Subhuti calls them the front and back advantages and disadvantages as the front and back of each of these myths. And so we're exploring that. Partly we're exploring that because I think you find these different approaches in the order. And sometimes what happens is that we argue about different approaches, different meditation practices, different approaches, and we misunderstand each other. And we say, no, you're wrong and I'm right, and and I think that actually what we're trying to show is that they're just different approaches, and yet they do have their advantages. They do have their pitfalls, each one. And actually, if you can hold them lightly and see them as metaphors, you might be able to navigate your way through without falling into some of the traps of each one.
So it could have a harmonising effect, maybe. In
I think it could. I think it could. So it's a model that Subhuti came up with. It's not a traditional model, but Maitri Bandhu and I are sort of unpacking that a bit more.
When might we see it, or should we ask Maitri Bandhu that?
Yeah, ask Maitri Bandhu. He thinks it's at least a year, maybe I think 2 years away, which is a bit odd, isn't it? Because how long can it take? We've been talking about it since before the pandemic, but both of us are only sort of doing it as one sort of project amongst lots of others. So I think it might be at least a year, maybe 18 months, maybe 2 years.
Well, Jnanavaca, tremendous amount in there.
Thank you.
We're going to have a chance to ask more questions after the tea break. But let's thank Jnanavaca very much for very arrive downstairs for tea and whatever else is down there, let's just take a few moments, like 5 minutes, just to sit quietly and just let what we've been hearing percolate. Maybe a question that might pop up to us. So let's just have 5 minutes quiet sitting. let's